Okay, well, I'm going to start, that's okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this three-pipe webinar held in partnership with the Women in Toys Network. My name is Jim. I'm one of the co-founders of Three Pipe, and I will be chairing the session today. Three Pipe is a brand performance agency. We work with many family and parenting brands, supporting them across a wide range of marketing channels, from running busy press offices for Christmas and campaigns to the likes of VTech and Leapfrog, to driving Amazon sales across Europe for Tomy. We act as a brand performance agency and guardian for many brands similar to yourselves, which is one of the reasons why we're here today. And we're going to be talking about a hot topic, which is gender diversity in the toy and parenting sector. So a bit more about today. We have a fantastic panel of experts keen to share their thoughts and insights around gender stereotyping. My colleague, Sophie Lennon, who's head of PR here at Three Pipe, will be delivering a short presentation about the current state of play, together with some historical context and some tips and ideas for brands about thinking about while developing their own mark-on strategies. We also will then have a short panel discussion with some of the industry's best blue flame thinkers. But if you have any questions as we go through the webinar, please use the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to incorporate some of those answers to those questions as we go along as well. So I'll hand over to Sophie, and then we'll come back for a Q&A around the content. Sophie, over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everybody. If you just bear with me while I just share my screen so you can all see the presentation. Great. Can everyone see that? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Lovely. Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you are. As Jim said, my name is Sophie Lennon, and I am the head of PR and social at Three Pipe Reply. It's going to be great today. We're going to do a presentation on gender stereotyping in the toy industry, and as Jim said, then have a really good Q&A around it, because it is still very much a hot topic at the moment. So if I start. So the first question we really need to talk about around this is whether this still exists. We talk about it within our respective careers and disciplines, but really we need to know, is it a thing, or is it something that basically people are just talking about as a thing? So like any good PR person, obviously the first thing we do to determine this is to have a glance at Google. First off, you can see here, looking through the years and our search terms, absolutely it's still a thing. More so a few years back, but girls, boys and boys toys are very much still prevalent search terms. Likewise here, but pink and blue the first time, boys and girls the second time, very much still ongoing. However, the only slight deviation in this is when it comes to clothing in this sector. Blue and pink baby clothes are still very high up there, in fact, higher than they were 18 years ago. But we are starting to see things like gender neutral clothing, white, grey, yellow, for example, all coming up in the area here. But that's really simple, not really enough to determine this subject. So what we've done is we've had a look at the history behind this to determine where we are at the moment. So going back as far as the 1920s to 1960s, it's fair to say that toys for girls particularly were very much focused on domestic duties, as you can see by this advertisement here. Really, this is reflective of what boys and girls saw their parents do. Boys, men, fathers very much went out to work. Mothers very much stayed at home. And therefore, it's not really unheard of to think that this is how the way toys and this kind of industry was portrayed. Then when we come into the 1970s, it starts to mix things up a bit. If we take the Sears catalogue, for example, we see some really good things with less than 2% of toys advertised explicitly for boys and girls. However, if we go to some of these images, there are still within some of the perhaps more UK catalogues, which are having very gender stereotypical pictures associated with these toys. Moving on to the 80s, my kind of era. So the biggest thing that happened here really was the deregulation of children's television, which created such a massive spark and peak in advertising that really it got a little bit uncontrolled, and girls and boys toys became commonplace within the industry. And in actual fact, research that shows that over 50% of toys had an assigned gender at that point in time. But it's when we get to the 90s and early 2000s that this colour coding system really came alive. Blue is for boys, pink is for girls. It became commonplace in the pictures that we saw, the catalogues, etc. But I guess really importantly as well, it became really commonplace in the language that was being talked about around toys, and the little homemaker for girls turned into the little princess for girls, and the sort of muscle-bound hero action adventure for boys is what carried on. Moving into the early 2000s, now this was a really, really important time for change. The Mumsnet Let Toys Be Toys campaign went absolutely viral. Now, to give you a little bit of context to this was formed as a result of a thread on our popular forum on Mumsnet, where parents were frustrated at the marketing of toys, particularly around signage and the fact that in certain retailers there were toys for girls, toys for boys, and there was a real push to have this removed in the first instance. And in fact, in the very first year, this campaign alone managed to persuade 15 retailers, including the likes of Tesco, Debenhams, Toys R Us, to remove their boys and girls signs and actually to go for more gender neutral advertising. Interestingly, there's been another lot of research by this campaign just last year, which looked at how things have changed. And although we are going in the right direction, we're definitely not there yet. And more boys and girls playing together is seen as a good thing, etc. But we are not there yet. So we'll come back to this. At the same time, research showed that boys were 4 times more likely to be seen playing with a boy than girls, which of course has all sorts of far-reaching consequences. So there was a campaign put together by Sport England called This Girl Can, which was very much promoting girls within the sports industry. Moving on to 2020, gender stereotypes were banned from British adverts, a real key moment for the industry. And very, very quickly, brands were starting to be fined for actually not adhering to these rules. So Volkswagen and Philadelphia, for example, were just a couple of the early people who fell foul of this. So people started to listen. And then last year, a really interesting point here, which one of my panelists is probably going to pick up on later on, is that California enforced a gender neutral toy aisle in larger stores. So in stores which had a certain amount of revenue, there had to be an aisle assigned for gender neutral toys. Possibly that's a controversial subject, but we'll come on to discuss that. So then digging deeper into the data and what does it actually show about what's happening and what people feel. Couple of key points that we've picked out here. Research shows that pastel colours are shown to lower boys' aptitude to engineering, rendering it too girly. Therefore, brands felt that to encourage boys into the engineering space, they needed to have these bolder boy-like colours. Counter stereotyping. Really, really simple. The solution is simply to have girls playing with what they thought were boys' toys and boys playing with what they thought were girls' toys, to show and to open minds for children that it's perfectly okay and it's a really good thing. As many of us know as parents, kids police kids, and one of the big topics and things that needs to be addressed within this sector is the shame that other children bring on other children for not conforming to a particular stereotype. It starts really, really early on, and it's possibly one of the bigger reasons why children aren't pushing towards different toy types. And by early primary school age, children have already decided what men do and what women do. So that is as early as, 4 rising 5, we start primary school now, which just goes to show what the toy industry needs to do at a really young age to counteract this feeling. And the stats can't lie. This is some research showing a group of year 3 students who were questioned. Now, year 3 is age 7 to 8. And the girls and boys were asked to say what they thought the top girls' jobs were and the top boys' jobs were. I'll just dip into the top 3. So the girls believed that teacher, working with animals, being a vet, or in the arts were the top 3 jobs that they should do. whereas the boys felt sports person, STEM, which is now called STEAM, and police and defence. A very, very real difference there in what these young children feel they will be doing when they grow older. So if we just go back to the original questions, which is asking whether gender stereotyping is still existing in the toy industry, at the moment, it's very clearly a yes. So we took a look at what the parents were thinking. 41% of parents prefer to buy gender neutral toys. That's a really big amount. 61% of women and 46% of men believe children should be raised in a gender neutral environments, and they want toys to be gender inclusive. So they want them to have bits of everything within them. And we think this is reflective of a society where we are coming to accept a spectrum of identity, not just within toys. Now, this next statistic upset me a little bit as a mother of 3 daughters. So parents are 6 times more likely to think of scientists and athletes as men than women, and 8 times more likely to think of boys as engineers. That's a really, really big figure still today. Girls seem to typically be pushed into sort of the cognitive and artistic professions, whereas boys are led to the STEAM-based roles. And when we're talking about, it's been a real seismic change in boys heading towards teachers' careers, but needs to be more in terms of the childcare, looking after nursery workers' career. That's still really low, according to recent research. And it's really important to also really look at how the children feel. And I think nothing better sums this up than this letter, or part of this letter, that a little girl called Charlotte, who's only 7, wrote to Lego to say, and I'm just actually going to read this word for word for you. It says, all the girls did was sit at home, go to the beach and shop, and they had no jobs. But the boys went on adventures, worked, saved people and had jobs, even swam with sharks. And this was a little girl who absolutely loved her Lego, but at the age of 7 had realised that what was being offered to her was very, very different than what was being offered to boys her age. Now, Lego have come on to do really good things, which we'll come on to talk about, but it's important to realise here that the children don't actually want to have gender stereotypical toys. Children want to play with everything. They just need to be given the chance. Another key demographic in this whole discussion point is grandparents. So we are living in an age whereby, brilliantly, mums and dads and all sorts of people are out to work. We're really, really busy, and we are relying on grandparents to form part of our network of support. So often looking after our children, you know, at key working times, which is fabulous. However, this demographic has been shown to struggle to let go of gendered gift choices. So this generation is more likely to go into a shop, search online, whichever way they do it, and look for specific toys for girls and toys for boys. Now, it's probably not, this isn't a surprise given the history that we've just talked through and the fact that, you know, in sort of older generations, this is what happened. But it is something that we need to touch upon, and we need to educate, and we need to help change, because the parents are very much moving in that direction of that era, but the grandparents need more education, research has shown. So it's still a yes, but we're moving in the right direction. What we thought it would be interesting to do is to give you some quick fire examples. Now, this isn't to name and shame. We can all improve in places, obviously, but we think there are some brands who could possibly do it better in the future. And then there are some brands that are really doing it well and that others can take advice from. So if we just start off with this first one, it's fairly self-explanatory, but this is a social media post from Aldi. And as you can see, there is a little girl in a pink t-shirt sat next to a cleaning set, Henry the Hoover, quite cool Henry the Hoover. It's all pink. Everything is pink around it, as if to suggest that this little girl should be playing with this. And this very prominent influencer, I'm sure many of you know her, Pregnant Then Screwed, cannot believe that this sort of thing is being depicted in advertising in this day and age. They can definitely do it better. Nerf, they have historically only used boys within their advertisements, within their catalogues, online, etc. But girls absolutely love this sort of thing. My girls absolutely love it. So on the right is where they were a couple of years ago. On the left is where they're coming into. Not quite there yet, but again, they were using a particular gender to try and sell their toys. And actually, as we'll come on to later, missing out on a whole other half who love this. And then finally, Keenware, if I just draw your attention to the product at the bottom, Little Princess Palace and Knight's Castle, they are exactly the same product. One is pink and one is blue, but if you look carefully, or blue with an accent and pink with an accent, if you look carefully, they are the same product. Now, why do we need to have a product which is suitable for a little girl and a little boy to differentiate their play, when it would be much easier to have a product that suits everybody and have it all together? Moving on to the good ones. So this was part of the Let Toys Be Toys campaign, which is still going really strong. So on the left is the signage in Hamleys in 2011, where you can quite clearly see there's a boys section and a girls section in pink and blue. And here is the signage today, who have moved forwards brilliantly. It's all about the toys USPs. They're all mixed up together, and girls and boys can flock to see all of their different favourite brands. As I said, Lego have really come on leaps and bounds, and they have launched the first LGBTQ set. It was last year, actually. It's now one of their best-selling items. And really what this is doing is it's showing creativity, individuality, diversity, and they've really come out of themselves to do this. Again, because of Charlotte to start with, and then they did some more research to find it, they have now removed gender bias from their toys going forward. So there's still the old toys there, but going forwards. And for example, the Lego City Wildlife Rescue Camp has been launched. It's absolutely beautiful, something that boys and girls can both play with together, both bring out different skills in them. And that is what they are aiming to do going forwards, bring out these multi-gender style toys. And of course, Barbie, we all remember Barbie, but in September 2019, they brought out their gender neutral dolls. They were so popular. There was obviously a real want for them without even knowing, and they are now one of their best selling items. So doing really, really well. So looking at this research and looking at the examples of who's doing what, we need to look at what if brands choose to ignore these stats, or continue to choose to ignore really what the parents, what the children, what the grandparents, what everybody's saying. So first off, they are alienating a huge portion of their audience. Remember, looking back at the stats, over half of parents think that they would like their children to be brought up to play in a gender neutral environment. And by continuing to stereotype, that isn't happening. Very, very recent research this year has shown that by continuing to assign gendered labels to toys, it's proven to increase feelings of anxiety amongst children. And this really goes back to the children policing children, the children not feeling they can play with a boy's toy or a girl's toy. Children can be mean. And in this post-COVID world where children have all sorts of anxieties, by continuing to do this, we're just bringing in more, which we don't need to do. And then thirdly, we are risking highlighting a stereotype over a product USP. So if you take the castle we just looked at, I have no idea what the product USP of that castle is. All I know is that one is pink, so I presume going towards a girl, and one is blue, heading towards a boy. I don't know what functionality that castle has. I don't know why it's different to other castles on the market. They are not making the best of their products. So, as the PR person in the room, what's the role for PR here? Because we all need to play a part in making sure that we move this forwards. Now, we've just popped 4 here to share with you, but there are lots more than this. So as communications people, we need to be sharing the key message that play is universal. Play is universal to all children. It is regardless of stereotypes. You can play with everything. We need to celebrate self-expression. Instead of brandishing non-conformism, we need to celebrate the little things that are different. Make the stories out of the smaller things. That's what will hit the press. We need to encourage imaginative play by focusing on the USP. Again, back to my last point, we need to find the unique selling point, and we need to highlight that, and we need to be pushing that in our communications, and it should have nothing to do with the colour or who it's intended for. And we need to celebrate the choice the children have. We don't have to conform with gender specific asks. And I mean by that, you know, if we are asked by journalists for toys, top 10 best girls toys, top 10 best boys toys, we also have a moral obligation to actually frame that conversation differently and actually offer a different offering. So we need to say no, we need to play our part. So it's time to be braver, and what we're encouraging our brands and our clients to do is actually be a champion of something rather than a conformist. And just to finish off, we wanted to give you a couple of ideas of what we're working across now for some of our clients, and actually what's really important and being talked about within the media world. STEAM, as I was saying earlier, used to be STEM, now added art in to make STEAM. It's a really big conversation topic that's going on in schools at the moment, promoting science and math skills, a lot to do with possible catch-up, a lot to do with showing a variation of career prospects amongst this. So we are looking for stories amongst our STEAM toys and using those as a way into the media. Green toys, we know as adults that we talk about sustainability a lot. Adults talk about sustainability with their children at the dinner table. In fact, at our house, it's often brought up by the children, not the adults. It's a big topic of conversation. So we need to be looking at what our toys are doing in the sector, looking at what our brands are doing and promoting that. And social emotional learning. There's a big push at the moment on toys that help children stay calm and help them manage their feelings. It's been a tough, you know, couple of years for everybody, but especially for our children. And there's a lot of really great toys coming out, and so we're looking at a lot of partnerships with mental health charities, something worth writing about and that can appeal to all children and parents and carers. And that finishes up my presentation. So I'm going to pass over to Jim.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for that brilliant presentation. And don't worry, everybody, we will be providing the slides and the recording available after the webinar. So don't worry if you didn't get some of those notes down. So now we're going to move on to the discussion, and it's my opportunity to introduce a fantastic panel that we have here this afternoon. We have Amanda, we have Charlie, and we have Claire. But first of all, I'll introduce Amanda, who probably needs no introduction, really. Dr. Amanda Gummer. Amanda is an internationally renowned expert on play, parenting, and child development. She has a PhD in neuropsychology and a postgraduate certificate in higher education, and 20 years experience working with children and families. She is also UK chapter chair for the Women in Toys Network. We also have Claire Willett. Claire is CEO and founder of Not Only Pink and Blue, a business that she created to ensure that we grow a generation of equals by challenging bio behaviour that perpetuates stereotypes, creating parent-friendly work cultures, and collaborating with leaders. Not Only Pink and Blue is helping create a world that does not stereotype children. I got that out. Charlie as well, Charlie Young, MBE. Charlie is CEO and co-founder of the Girls Network, a charity that provides 14 to 19-year-old girls from the least advantaged communities with a female mentor and a network of professional female role models. As a secondary school teacher, she saw firsthand how girls and young women were limited by their gender and background, and knew she had to do something about it. She left teaching and since grown the charity from supporting just 30 girls in 2013 to over 1,400 and celebrating their 10th birthday next year as well. Congratulations, Charlie. So we'll move on to some questions, and we're going to start with you, Amanda, if that's okay. Again, if anyone's got any additional questions, please do use the Q&A, and our panelists will also help answer those as we go along too. But Amanda, have you noticed any gender trends in the toys being submitted for the STEAM accreditation program that you're involved with?
Yeah, so we are doing the STEAM accreditation for the Toy Association, and we've had over 100 or so toys since we launched in August. And really, I'm really pleased to say that the vast majority of them are gender neutral. And I think that that is something that's representative of the sort of the innovative thinking of the people, of the companies that are involved in the STEAM program. And I think we've really only seen a couple of very boy-centric products come through. And in the reports that we provide back, we do tend to challenge those stereotypes. If the play behavior, I mean, we don't get involved in the marketing or the packaging or anything, it's all about assessing the play behavior. But if the play behavior is reinforcing stereotypes, that will be something that we challenge in the report that we send back. But no, actually, reassuringly, I think the STEAM accreditation program is one of the sort of shining examples of people who are forward thinking, looking at the future, and actually taking that gender neutral message to heart and really embedding it in their product development.
Great. And what feedback have you had from users using the Good Toy Guide? Because obviously you don't have a filter for boy and girls toys. And when did you make that change, I guess? Or has it always been like that? And what feedback has there been?
So I think we've not had anybody complain about the fact they can't find the toys they're looking for. We use other filters, age, play type, toy type, skills developed. So we use, there's lots of ways for people to filter on the Good Toy Guide. But the overwhelming, the overwhelming sense is that toys should be available to be played with by everybody without stigma. So, and I think that it feels like a very safe space, and the users of the Good Toy Guide, the parents and the sort of gift givers seem to like the fact that they're not shoehorned or channeled too narrowly in their product section. Because I think the minute if you do go onto a website that does have a boys and a girls toy, and you type in birthday present for a 4-year-old girl, the options are limited, because it comes down to those very pink sparkly products. So I think it feels like a very inclusive, safe space, I think, is the feedback we've had from our end users. And I think the clients like it too. The toy companies that submit products for Good Toy Guide, they also like the fact that it's not a genderized platform.
Right, I'll bring you in quickly, obviously, because you have a similar sort of functionality for people to discover the right toy, but it's a similar sort of setup for you as well on your site, isn't it?
Yeah, so we put brands on our site, and most of them are small independent brands that are often quite a bit harder to find, really, especially if you're doing a Google search, for example. But we only take on brands who don't have girl boy filters, and that is for many of the reasons that Amanda's just said. But one of the key things for me is around the choice. So you invariably on sites, and unfortunately it is true, the reality is you'll be forced to choose boy or girl at some point, because you're put into a filtering system. And I think what often happens is whoever's buying, if you thought about it, you'd realize it, but you don't really realize it at the time, that means that you are being given some options, but you're not being given others. And people don't have time to refilter a whole website and look again. And so, and it's the journey that you're taken on. And so people invariably are buying stuff that actually reinforces a stereotype without really realizing it, because they're not thinking about it. So our point is, come along to the site. Every single brand on there doesn't have girl boy filters. You can then search through the type of product you want to buy, and then you'll go off to that brand site, and then you can buy from them direct. But yeah, very much small brands that don't have the girl boy filter to negate that issue that it creates around stereotypes.
Okay. Actually, while you're talking, I'm thinking I've got 2 girls, and I think algorithms are certainly to blame at some point as well, from even a content recommendation perspective, and perhaps a separate question later on.
Yeah.
But Amanda, just coming back to you, we talked a bit about parents and also about grandparents. I mean, what can we be doing to help educate them differently, and how do we I guess treat them differently, because there's a generational difference here, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, and I thought it was really interesting when Sophie was saying about the grandparents are more likely to sort of search for girls versus boys, and I wonder whether that is because that's sort of more ingrained in their generation, or maybe because they feel less confident that they know the children as well as the parents do, so they're sort of looking for other sort of props, I guess, or prompts. But I think one of the the biggest challenges I feel is girls seem to be able to play more with STEAM toys, and parents seem less willing to let boys play with dolls, and that kind of, oh, it's girly, and you know, the whole, oh, you throw like a girl, or you know, those kind of negative criticisms, or comments that are derogatory and genderized, I think is one of the biggest things we need to be helping parents understand, is that, you know, that's really not helpful. And play, you know, throwing like a girl could mean that you throw really well, or running like a girl could mean you run really fast. It shouldn't be a negative phrase. So I think making sure that parents understand the power of their words, and, you know, don't be a sissy, don't be a baby, don't be a girl if you're crying, you know, those kind of, that all needs to change. I think schools, as well as the sort of wider social media and society, all have a role to play in helping parents just relax a little bit more about that kind of the gender fluidity, and not be too worried about what the kids are playing with.
I think also a lot of that is unconscious. I mean, a lot of that language, certainly when I'm out doing talks, whether that's in business or schools or wherever, when you get people to think about that language, and that's exactly it, you know, oh, you run like a girl, oh, that's girly. I mean, it's used as a pejorative, which is not a good place to be, but people don't really realize they're using it in that way. Again, it's an ingrained language that we have to actively change. And so when we really get people to think about those and realize they're saying them, most people are quite shocked when you say, you need to think through the implications of using that language in that negative sense. And they suddenly go, oh God, that's awful. But they haven't thought about it, because language is just part of how we speak. So I agree, we have to actively challenge some of those things, which really does have a huge effect on our children.
And I was just going to
I'll ask Charlie very quickly. Obviously, you used to be a teacher, so I'll bring you in from your sort of educational perspective. And is it too much? So teachers seem to be asked to do too many things anyway. But I mean, what's the role of a teacher in this as well?
I think a huge role to be played there. I mean, I think the equivalent that's cited quite a lot in schools is when a teacher needs a hand with a big pile of books, and so often you hear them saying, "Oh, I need a big, strong boy to help me carry these books." You know, so easily and often said, that makes a really big difference. Or the way that there's research showing on how teachers engage with boys and girls in different subjects. So one of the examples that has always really stuck with me was a maths teacher who was going around a mixed classroom of students while they were working on a problem. And he was speaking to a couple of girls and sort of coaching them to the answer, and they finally got the answer, and he said, fantastic, well done, you've done it, great girls. Then he goes and has a similar conversation with the boys, and then they get there, he's like, right, now do this next bit, come on. And it was the way he was praising and encouraging those students. He wasn't expressly saying girls aren't very good at maths and boys are, but the way he was talking about it was very much giving that signal. And so I think, you know, sometimes it's more overt and sometimes less overt, but it's all sending that same message. So I think, you know, there's a really important place for teacher training to include more of that, you know, more understanding around unconscious bias and how that plays out, and the importance of that, because it has a massive impact on students in the classroom.
Claire, I'll just come back to you again. Is it too simple to suggest we should just stop making pink and blue toys?
It's way too simple, unfortunately. First of all, because pink and blue are great colours, right? There is no problem with the colours, absolutely no problem whatsoever. The problem is the language that we've put around it, and therefore the meaning it's given. And actually, when we look back, pink and blue were the opposite way around, right? When pastels first came in, blue was actually a girl's colour, was a boy's colour. Now, similar language though, when you listen to it, you know, the boys' colour, it was because it was strong and vibrant, and the blue was for girls because it was more passive and it was pretty. And so it's quite dainty, it's quite interesting. So that it was around the kind of 40s, 50s, it really swapped and properly stuck in. And they think it's something around the military. A lot of military colours were blue, navy blue, and that was obviously then became a very masculine colour because that's who was in the military. And so then it really filtered down and became, there were lots of other theories, but that's kind of the one that really they think has happened. And then that's become the key. Now, what we've done is swap the language, but and swapped the colors but kept the language. And that's one of the big issues, because then pink has got that association not just with, you know, that particular language, but also then with girls, and blue for boys. And it's interesting that obviously Let Toys Be Toys was spoken about, and they talked about in that same study that you referenced, the most recent one about advertising, was there's this, what they're calling the pink zone, is very much still sitting in the girls area. So actually a lot of the other places you're seeing a bit more mixed stuff, but I have to say that I think the legislation's great on when it comes to gender stereotypes, but it has not filtered into children's advertising. Yes, it's been upheld on some adult pieces, but not in children's. And I don't think that's good enough personally. Like if you look at any girls advert, look at that kind of pink zone, anything to do with hair, anything to do with shopping, anything to do with makeup, anything to do, it all sits within the girls. And even, I mean, I've also got 2 young children and they absolutely notice it. Look, why are they saying that's only for girls? I mean, I'm like, I've got young children who pick up on this and can read that. I mean, obviously they understand a bit more about stereotypes because I'm in the house too, but they're questioning it, right? They're going, why are they saying that's only for girls? Because they've seen the pink, they've seen that there are only girls there, and they've seen that it's a certain thing. So I think, no, it's not. I think that we need to stop dividing by colour. So you've got something that's quote unquote boy stereotypical, it's blue, and something that's girl stereotypical, it's pink. We need to see a mixture of people playing with those colours, and we need to empower those colours. So let's talk about what's the superpower that goes with pink. You know, let's really bring that up, and let's actually say, okay, you can be soft and sensitive with blue. So we mix the language around those and broaden the range of colours. There are loads of colours. Let's use them all, because all colours, as far as we're concerned, are for all children and everyone, quite frankly.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Jim, if that's okay. You're so right. In the latest Let Toys Be Toys in December, it talked about the pink zone no-go for boys, but the other way around. But it also looked at, for further reading, when anyone wants to look at, the words that go with pink versus the words that go with blue. And the interesting one was, in blue, there was battle, there was activity, and in pink, there was glitter. It was huge, that kind of thing. But I was just going to say, it also bears a problem with the children who, let's just take an example, are girly, but don't want to be girly. They actually want to, do you know what I mean? And they run away from that, you know, that synopsis of how it's explained, and they do then look for something else. Like for example, on a football team, I have a daughter on a football team, it's absolutely applauded, yet a little boy going to a netball team is absolutely not discussed and not the case. You know, it's definitely, I think, a little bit more one-sided at the moment for the genders. It's not split equally on the pink blue debate. It's definitely a bit more adverse to the pink side from that side, and the girls are going more towards blue. I think there's been a shift that way recently.
Totally.
I've had a question come in, and so I'll just pitch that to you guys. And it's something that's probably not a big surprise, but someone working in licensing and feeling like that the retailers are demanding this in terms of packaging. What can brands do to sort of counteract that and push back on retailers? But because ultimately the retailers have the power, right? Or do they not?
Well, really, Jim, they need to look at the research behind it, and they need to show that people actually don't want this anymore. You know, they need to show that over half of parents actually want gender neutral toys. So by conforming to the retailers, which you're right, do have a huge power, you know, they're not going to reach their maximum audience. And actually there's an education job to be done there, and it's not being spoken about enough.
I think you'll find retailers will tell you that that's how people shop. They shop by boy and girl, and often you kind of go, well, you can kind of see why, right? Where's your lowest common denominator? And Amanda touched on it earlier, is if you don't know much about a child, they'll go to lowest common denominator. What's the thing we talk about all the time? Literally from birth, we split kids like it from the beginning, boys and girls. That's what we do, right? And so that's where they'll go. So they will shop that way. However, we need to change shopping behavior. We know we can change behavior. We can do it pretty quickly. We've seen it in the last 2 years. We can really do that, but we have to work collectively and we have to drive it together. And let's change that. Let's make it about activity. You know, okay, let's push it really far and go, let's make it about attitude. You know, what does that kind of attitude mean that you want to play with or try? And let's actually, because what we want to do is give kids as much choice as possible. And so if you've got people going in buying by different type of activity or attitude, they're likely to buy something that they think a child would like, right? That's going to give a child a big range of toys. Instead of, if we're in this kind of really slim filter, which is what this kind of girl-boy split does, it really narrows the choices. The issue is, as soon as we narrow those play choices, we narrow the skills that we've developed in the children. Therefore, we develop the options they have as they grow up. We narrow down their aspirations, we narrow down their career choices. I mean, it really does. It sounds dramatic, but it really does come down to that play time, because that is developing the skill sets for the rest of your life.
And I think that's a really good segue to Charlie right there, in terms of understanding the impact of this as girls grow up to be young women, and what do you see happening, Charlie?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're completely right that you do see that play out throughout their teenage years. So we work primarily 14 to 19-year-olds, but then into their 20s as well. We see a massive impact on their behaviour, so how they feel they should behave, and the kind of skills and attributes they feel they should exhibit. What we see amongst girls particularly is a real risk aversion, because research suggests it's often because they're praised for outcome rather than process. So, well done, you've achieved that really well, rather than, oh, great effort for doing that. So there seems to be a real risk aversion, therefore they won't take opportunities even when they're there. They're really focused on getting things right. There's an expectation around being polite, neat, tidy, quiet, compliant. So all of those are the kind of behaviours that unconsciously often we've reinforced throughout the years. And that then has an impact on the opportunities they take up, how they engage with each other, but then also an impact on aspirations. And I think that was the other thing, Claire, you were sort of highlighting, is the kinds of things they go on to do. There's a real expectation that girls are innately more creative and innately more caring, because those are the skills we're seeing. Well, why are we seeing so many skills? Well, they've been playing with dolls, and we've been teaching them how to be caring and teach them how to paint. So, and it's not true. Of course, there are many young women that are not creative or caring, particularly in a much more sort of engineering focus, but we see that trend partly because of how they've been playing and how they've grown up, and that means that they aren't going towards those careers that they might otherwise really love and otherwise really be passionate about. And that, coupled with a lack of role models, of female role models in those careers, means that girls and young women are feeling really limited, and that's detrimenting us as a society as well, because the amount of talent we're missing out on because of that. I think the final thing I pick up with is that sort of policing. So you see it in children, and you really see it in young adults as well, how much they police other young adults who are not conforming to the gendered expectations. I've always really liked the gender bread person. I don't know if you've come across that before, but that is a really helpful tool for pulling apart biological sex, gender identity, gender expression, and sexuality. I think those four things are often conflated quite a lot. And generally it's that gender expression that is policed. So it doesn't matter what your biological sex is or how you identify. If you are not conforming, if you're not behaving in a way that matches the biological sex you're presenting, then you get really ostracized by your peers. And that can be a real problem in reinforcing those expectations and stereotypes. And that's a lot of the work we are then doing. A lot of the stuff we're unpicking is, okay, well, how can we give you a lot of opportunity, show you those options, and enable you from the point you're at to make the choice that's best for you and follow the thing that you really want to do. But I do often wonder, well, actually, what would those choices look like if they hadn't had so many years of those gender stereotypes and that conditioning to be expected to behave a certain way or like a certain thing?
And how are you, Charlie, how are you practically breaking down some of these biased expectations within the organisation?
I mean, a big bit of it is that role modelling piece. So through our mentor pool, we are trying to recruit as diverse a range of women as we can, but particularly looking at those careers where women are underrepresented, so that the girls can see through their mentor or through that wider network women that look like them being successful in lots of different careers and indeed futures, exhibiting what it can be, what can success look like as a woman, and it can be so many different things. Another bit of the work is actually giving them practical opportunity and access to a whole range of different careers. So, what does it feel like to be an engineer for the day? What does it feel like to be a musician for the day? But making sure that that is as broad as possible. So again, there is choice there. And then working with our mentors, working with schools to have those conversations about bias and unconscious bias and how that's manifesting, so that we can hopefully try and reinforce the messages that we are giving at every touch point with the young women we're working with.
Can I jump in here, Charlie, because that's all fantastic stuff. And I think in terms of for the industry, where they come in and the question about, you know, who's doing it well and who is giving that representation, it's not about undervaluing men, it's not about men bashing, it's just about leveling up. And one of the best examples I've seen of this is the Let's Go See characters, where you've got Pilot Polly and Pilot Ollie, and they're just both pilots, and it's not one's better than the other. It's a lovely, really inclusive brand. And if I think going back to that question, Jim, if we've got retailers who are demanding that kind of thing from their suppliers, because they are, I think we all need to lead and not necessarily fall back on the, oh, it's what the customers want excuse, because customers don't know necessarily what they want until they're presented with it. So I think, you know, being able to find those really key characters. CBeebies has got some great gender neutral licenses and characterizations. And I think it's all of, if we all work together, the manufacturers, to really think about some of the things that we've raised today and bring it in their product development process, the retailers demanding that they get supplied with those kind of products, and as working with the parents and the gift givers to make sure that they are making their feelings known and voting with their feet and using platforms and stores that don't buy into the genderized categorization. I think it needs to be a multi-pronged approach, but I think it's so important that we do show that girls have it brought a lump to my throat when you were saying about their lack of ambition, because they've not been given, girls haven't been taught that it's okay to challenge and strive and you know, they need to be neat and tidy and conformist and compliant. And I think that's one of the things on top of what I'm seeing as a sort of a mental health issues as well, with anxiety and everything. It all compounds, and we're really doing these girls a disservice if we don't address this as early as possible, really.
Agree. I've been doing some work with Kidzania, who I'm sure you all know does the piece from 4 to 14. Kids go in and play in the city, and what they have found is that girls pretty much across the board through all these age groups will go in and do something that is 1 year below them or potentially 2 years below them. Boys will go in and automatically do something that is 2 years above them. And it's really interesting. And when I was talking to them about it, they were saying, I feel like it's a confidence piece. And I said, there is a confidence piece, but there is also a risk-taking piece, of which exactly what Charlie talked about. Girls are taught not to take risks, because actually being a perfectionist is better. That's what you're rewarded for. So it is really interesting that they saw that, and they were really concerned to see it didn't change all the way up to the age of 14. It stayed in that way, and it was like, and they were really surprised to see it, but really bears out the issues that, you know, Amanda and Charlie are talking about as well.
We had another question about how we can change everything. Is it on the retailers or is it on the licensed stores? And I think we've kind of touched on that a little bit in terms of it. I guess interestingly, retailers, I think, are having less power than before in terms of direct consumer, and Amazon being a route to market, and less gatekeepers in between brands and the consumer potentially. But do any of you guys have any sort of final thoughts as we wrap up, and I give people a chance to ask another question on Q&A? Is there anything you'd like to add that perhaps we haven't touched upon this session?
The only thing I want to reinforce is that we talk a lot about girls, and we've all said it, all of us separately, but this does have massive impact on boys as well, and it really does limit their options too. You know, it removes choices from them. And interestingly, you talked about the Lego study, Fran, earlier, but that study started off with Ready for Girls. That's what that study is called. They were really shocked at their findings, that they found that boys limit play more than girls when it comes to anything that, again, is in that kind of pink zone. And they were really surprised by how much it limited boys. And that's why a lot of their stuff has come out actually focusing on some of the things for boys, which is quite interesting. So it is really important that this is a broader conversation, and it does, you know, it's just as negative for boys. We've got to challenge that in the other way as well.
Okay. Any more for any more? I think otherwise we might wrap up there. I'd just like to say thank you so much to Sophie for the presentation, and also to the brilliant panelists, Charlie, Amanda, and Claire. We have all their contact details. You're easily found on LinkedIn, I know. So please, if anyone's interested in continuing the conversation, do reach out directly to the panelists. We have recorded the session as well, so everyone who attended and registered for the webinar will receive a link to the recording as well. But thank you very much for making time to watch the webinar today, and thank you to our panelists for contributing.